Count it all joy, Charles is back online. The Equally Yoked Show. Get yoked for free. Count it all joy, Charles is back online.
Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Equally Yoked Show, and I'm so glad to have you here today. So welcome back. I'm your host, Charles, but I'm glad to be with you because we have got some stuff to go over. Of course, I just want to say thank you for those who are joining me for the podcast tonight and or today if you're watching during the day, but otherwise we have so much to go over. But I do want to say just at the front, just at the get-go, and I'm so glad you're here. And of course, this is a podcast that has been growing substantially, and we have seen so much comments, so many people chatting, and of course, everybody is most certainly welcome to join us. So subscribe to the podcast, email us at freedom@equallyyokedshow.com. I want to get your thoughts as to what we're going over today. Now, we're going to be changing things up a little bit when it comes to this podcast. I do want to mention that if you want to directly interact with me as opposed to on the chat will be saved for the end. But I do want to mention that we want to start doing emails so that you would email the show. We would look at the emails so that we can get, we can help with streamlining everything when it comes to this podcast. So again, I do want to thank you guys for being here. And of course, we've got a lot to do, so let's get on with the show. So as we get started here, we've got the story at the very front, which is, of course, the Utah judge who's ruling on a couple of items when it comes to the Charlie Kirk suspect case. Now, he is asking for a couple of things, and we're going to be going over some of those things when it comes to these new rulings of the suspect. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And for those that are just joining in, thanks for being here. Email us, freedom@equallyyokedshow.com. Thank you. Let's get started.
And Chad Grunander on behalf of the state.
Your Honor, Kathy Nestor, Richard Novak, and Stacy Visser on behalf of Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. Welcome to both the prosecution and defense. Mr. Robinson, I understand, is appearing by WebEx. Mr. Robinson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. We're here on the Tyler James Robinson motion to appear in civilian clothing and without physical restraints at all pretrial hearings. Because of some of the arguments involved in court security protocols, the court held a closed hearing on October 24th, 2025. During that hearing, the parties addressed several related matters. The first, Mr. Robinson's motion to strike the sheriff's response. The second, Mr. Robinson's motion to appear in civilian clothing and without physical restraints. The third, the sheriff's and Mr. Robinson's request to limit or exclude visual recording and photography in the courtroom. And finally, the fourth matter, the state's request to have all non-evidentiary hearings held remotely. The parties have stipulated that the state's request to hold non-evidentiary hearings virtually, as well as the parties' joint request to limit electronic media coverage, both require further briefing. Those issues are not yet ready for the court's decision. To facilitate that briefing, the court directs as follows. If the state wishes to have all non-evidentiary hearings conducted via WebEx, it must file a separate motion. The court will not rely on prior briefing. The standard timelines for response and reply apply, and the parties must file a request to submit and request a hearing if desired. If the parties seek to limit or restrict electronic media coverage, they may file a joint motion. Again, the court will not rely on prior briefing. That motion must address the factors set forth in Rule 4-401.01 sub 2 of the Utah Rules of Judicial Administration. Standard response and reply times apply, and the parties must file a request to submit once the matter is ripe for decision. The court took under advisement two issues: the motion to strike and the motion to appear in civilian clothing and without restraints.
Now, by the way, the original hearing was scheduled for October 30th, but it has been postponed, with the next in-person hearing set for January 16th and January 30th. So we're going over some of the judge's rulings on what Charlie Kirk's suspect is hoping to have some of his requests, successful with what he's, of course, bringing before the court. So as we continue on here, we're going to get the judge's responses as to these requests. And of course, with some instances, some of these requests are denied and some of them are approved. So we're going to go ahead and go over these things as this continues on. So let's continue hearing what this Judge Tony Graff, the Utah's 4th District Court, has to say.
Court now issues its ruling. In regards to the motion to strike the sheriff's response, the prosecution and the sheriff's department filed a joint opposition to the defendant's motion to appear in civilian clothing and without restraints. Mr. Robinson moved to strike the sheriff's portion of that filing, arguing it was procedurally improper because the sheriff is not a party. At the hearing, all agreed that the sheriff's department is not a party in this case. The state and the sheriff's office nevertheless argued that the sheriff may file memoranda as a non-party. Mr. Robinson disagreed, but did not object to the court considering the sheriff's position on security. The court finds that the sheriff's department is not a party to this case, and therefore its joint filing with the prosecution was procedurally improper. Accordingly, defendant's motion to strike the sheriff's response is granted. However, under Rule 3-414 of the Utah Rules of Judicial Administration, the court is required to coordinate courtroom security with the sheriff's department. Consistent with that rule and with the defendant's agreement, the court has considered the substance of the state's opposition and the memorandum prepared by the court security director that was attached to it. Going forward, if either party has a security concern specific to this case, they may present evidence from the sheriff's department by affidavit, declaration, exhibit, or testimony. This order does not limit the sheriff's department's ability to coordinate with the court or otherwise act as authorized by law. Turning to the motion to appear in civilian clothing and without physical restraints. The parties agree that during trial, a defendant has a right to appear in civilian clothing and that any restraints must be concealed from the jury. Mr. Robinson now seeks to extend those rights to all pretrial proceedings. The court considered each request separately. In relation to requests to appear in civilian clothing, Mr. Robinson asks to appear in civilian clothing at all pretrial hearings. He argues that the extensive media coverage of this case creates a real risk of prejudice if the public and potential jurors repeatedly see him in jail attire.
Now, I want to know your guys' thoughts. Again, email me at freedom@equallyyoked.show.com to help me understand sort of your perspective as to what is going on here. Now, of course, the judge, Tony Graff, who's going over some of these requests by Robinson. Now, the judge did deny Robinson's request to appear without restraints. However, he did approve him to wear civilian clothing so that he doesn't appear to be suspect in custody or anybody that looks dangerous or anything like that. So he's going over this stuff, which I think, honestly, we need to back up for a bit, because regardless, with all the evidence that has come out from the FBI, obviously innocent until proven guilty. And he thinks that, I think it's more his lawyers talking on his behalf, of course, but think that there's going to be some type of prejudice when it comes to him wearing jail clothing. Now, I want to know your guys' thoughts. Again, equallyyoked.show.com, freedom@equallyyoked.show.com. So email me there.
The state, the sheriff's department, and the court security director opposed the request, arguing that jail clothing assists with safety and identification. The court has balanced these competing concerns. The case has attracted extraordinary public and media attention. Images of Mr. Robinson in jail clothing are likely to circulate widely and influence prospective jurors. Given the scale of that publicity, the risk of prejudice is significant. However, Mr. Robinson's, let me see here. As previously stated, Mr. Robinson sits before this court presumed innocent, and that presumption remains unless and until each element of every offense charged against him is proved beyond a reasonable doubt.
Now, of course, the Ryan Koberger incident in Idaho with the Idaho 4, he was wearing civilian clothes up until he pled guilty. Then he was in jumper suit, jail uniform. So, the sides are mixed here, whether he should be in civilian clothing, whether he should be in jail clothing or jail uniform. And we'll see what begins to formulate out of this in the conversations. Obviously, there's a lot of heated debate concerning this, and hopefully I can get your guys' thoughts when it comes to this. But I see your guys' comments. If you guys want to address me in the with regards to the podcast, I'll be reading your emails. Email me at freedom@equallyyoked.show.com.
To date, this has not occurred, and the presumption of innocence remains. Balancing these factors, the court finds that Mr. Robinson's right to the presumption of innocence outweighs the minimal inconvenience of permitting civilian attire, and Mr. Robinson shall be dressed as one who is presumed innocent. Accordingly, the defendant's request to appear in civilian clothing for all pretrial proceedings is granted. Defense counsel is directed to coordinate with the jail to ensure that this order is implemented, and the court further orders that if the clothing be provided 72 hours prior to any hearing. To the second request to appear without physical restraints, Mr. Robinson also requests to appear unrestrained during pretrial proceedings. He argues that visible restraints would prejudice potential jurors, undermine his dignity, and interfere with his ability to communicate with counsel. Rule 3-14 sub 9C of the Utah Rules of Judicial Administration requires that all in custody defendants be restrained unless otherwise ordered by the court. The court recognizes that Mr. Robinson has no criminal history and no record of misconduct while in custody. However, the charges he faces are extraordinarily serious, carrying potential penalties of life imprisonment or death.
Now, reminder, he does have a jumper that basically prevents him from using his clothing, jail uniform clothing, traditional jail uniform clothing for anything relating to possibly committing suicide or anything of that nature. I do believe he's on suicide watch. If he's not, you guys can correct me in the chat. So otherwise, for whatever reason, he's not seen here, and I think it's probably to further his or help his argument in these new proposals by his, of course, lawyers, and so why he's not being shown on the camera, I don't know. That's very interesting. We only have his voice. I'm not making any theories about that. I just want to mention that it's just strange. However, with these restrictions that Tyler Robinson and his lawyers are putting forth before the judge, we're also getting restrictions when it comes to media coverage. Of course, media that may not be photographed or filmed, film Robinson's restraints or to show him entering or exiting the courtroom in shackles. But I do believe that this can most certainly, and this should most certainly be viewed by the public so that we can also see what is happening, as opposed to something like the, P. Diddy case, where none of it was publicly broadcasted. I do think that, of course, because of the nature of this incident, of the fact that this was one of the most highest political assassinations, highest cases that we've seen in a while, that this should be public. The video feed, everything. So they're really trying to limit the media. They're trying to limit the coverage in the courtroom, the pictures. And I really hope that doesn't happen. So that ruling hasn't been made yet on photographing or video. However, it's just going to be a little bit tricky when it comes to being in the courtroom and not filming any of the restraints. So in that case, he would just have it, on the desk. And at what point, how much would you be able to cut off when it comes to the video? You'd have to be really tight on Charlie Kirk's suspect.
The safety of Mr. Robinson, the attorneys, court staff, and the public must remain the court's highest priority. The emotional nature of these proceedings also raise the risk of disruption. Given these factors, the defendant's request to appear without restraint is denied. The court directs the Sheriff's Department to conduct an individualized assessment and use the least restrictive restraints necessary to maintain safety. If those restraints impede the defendant's ability to communicate with counsel or take notes, counsel may renew the motion. I wish now to also address the decorum and media restrictions. To mitigate any potential prejudice, the court will amend its standing decorum order. The media will be prohibited from photographing or visually recording Mr. Robinson's restraints and from photographing or recording him while entering, exiting, or standing in the courtroom. In making this amendment, the court has considered the factors in Rule 4-401.01 sub 2. This is a high-profile case with strong public interest. Restricting the recording of restraints strikes the proper balance between Mr. Robinson's right to a fair proceeding and the public's right to access and transparency. In conclusion, the court orders as follows. Defendant's motion to strike the sheriff's response is granted. Defendant's motion to appear in civilian clothing is granted. Defendant's motion to appear without restraints is denied. The standing decorum order will be amended to prohibit any visual recording or photography of the defendant's restraints or of the defendant entering or exiting the courtroom. This constitutes the order of the court, and a written order and ruling will be published shortly. Both defense and prosecution have stipulated to vacate the October 30th hearing. Additional time is needed to complete discovery and to file motions addressing whether non-evidentiary hearings should be conducted virtually, whether to impose any blanket restrictions on cameras in the courtroom, and any other motions that may arise. This matter is set to return before the court on January 16th, 2026 at 1 p.m. and again on January 30th, 2026 at 1 p.m.
Now, Jolly Feats, thank you so much for the jewels. I appreciate that. God bless you. And I do want to mention the fact that Tyler Robinson is charged with aggravated murder. Now, they have to prove that he is guilty. So he's presumed innocent at this time, but otherwise the prosecutors intend to seek the death penalty, and they're giving the chance for Tyler Robinson to have the Tony Robinson. Wow, that is a big jump of people. Tyler Robinson to have the best lawyers on his side because of the intent to seek the death penalty, but the judge highlighted the extraordinary level of media and public attention, which rightly so. Rightly so. So, of course, with the fact that there may be media restrictions to protect Robinson's presumptions of innocence, and I agree with many of the chat that are saying, many of you guys that are saying that this should be public. That this should be public. And of course, the poll that we're conducting here, which I want you guys to get your votes in, thus so far we have 29 votes. Please continue voting that if you agree with the no media coverage of this case. So far we have a pretty huge number of no in the poll, which is 67% at this moment. So if you haven't gotten your vote in, please consider voting in this poll so we can get a better idea as to what you guys are thinking concerning this. Now, when it comes to Charlie Kirk and everything surrounding him, we have some new theories. We have some new theories when it comes to Rob McCoy's son, Mikey McCoy, who is the chief of staff at Turning Point USA. And of course, with all of this going down, we have to realize that there's still a lot of conspiracies coming out regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination, the videos that are circulating, more angles that are coming out, and of course this new theory, this new working theory is that Mikey McCoy was a part of this because of his nonchalant walking out or walking away, walking behind Charlie Kirk right after he gets shot. Now, what is this about? Well, the Charlie Kirk show, they addressed this, Andrew Colvett, Blake, and we have another guest on the show. I forget his name, but he's on the Breitbart podcast. And we're going to get some insight as to what happened during this moment. And they're going to explain it to us on the drilling that Charlie Kirk did to his staff when it comes to an event like this, because they knew that something could happen because of just his, I guess you could say, his popularity, but also the hatred towards him. Now, mind you, as big as Charlie Kirk was, I'm nowhere near that sort of level of publicity. Now, although this show is doing very well, email us at freedom@equallyokedshow.com. This show is doing very well so far. And I'm so grateful for you guys for being here, of course. So I want to know your thoughts on everything that is happening concerning this. But otherwise, they're going to debunk some of the viral videos that are going around circulating, attacking Mikey McCoy. So let me take you over to that video clip. And then we have Candace Owen also essentially denying what they're saying. She is off the rocker, for lack of better terms. Her mindset on this whole thing, and I've said from the very beginning that no matter what kind of evidence comes out when it comes to Charlie Kirk, when it comes to this case, nobody's going to believe it. Even with the basic facts that we have from what the FBI has presented, from what online media is circulating, from what those who were near him, like Frank Turek and Blake and Mikey McCoy, and from those who have personally communicated the various, points of views when they, of them at the event when it all went down. So once we get to Candace Owens, you're going to see kind of the wild response that she has concerning this. And I'll show you a screen clip, a screen grab from her video. I'm not going to play the clip because it does show the blurring. It's a blurred out of video of Charlie Kirk getting shot. I'm not going to show that here. It's just a screenshot moments before Charlie Kirk is shot. But let's go to let's go to this clip. Let's hear them explain what's going on here. One second, guys.
Remotely credible to really this weekend, and it's a video of Charlie's chief of staff. We made the decision that we wanted to address this head on because, candidly, there's so much intrigue, and I'm gonna do a generous thing. The intrigue is because people care about Charlie. Okay, so that part I understand.
You're more generous than I'd be.
Yes, and that's fine. And I am going to give you the floor here now, Blake, because you were there and you actually interacted with Mikey. You were with Mikey. You left the scene and then connected with Mikey. So explain what the video is.
All right, I'm not going to
set the scene.
I'm not going to wallow in it at length, but people have. It's gone viral and people have asked us to address it, and we're going to do so briefly. The video, without going way into it, is by, I can't even remember the guy's name. Someone made a video that is attacking Mikey, Charlie's friend, Charlie's chief of staff, a guy all of us know, a guy who we've seen on the show here the last few weeks.
Now, by the way, because of how public this is, people are making the rounds on social media. Now, a lot of you are saying that people are making money off of this scenario and reporting this and such. And we've seen Candace Owens with so many ads, concerning just full videos focusing on Charlie Kirk. Now, whether, it's questionable, but she does have a show to run and she does have sponsors that she has to go through. Now, I'm not going to accuse her on sponsors and anything of that nature. However, there are a lot of people on social media that are just making money off of this. Now, it's possible. We don't really know the numbers. So that's a sort of blanket statement that people are possibly making money from this by the conspiracy theories. And I'm speaking more to the conspiracy or the conspiratorial media that is out there, rather, when it comes to Charlie Kirk, the likes of which TikTok, which can produce you a certain amount of income, Instagram, maybe even YouTube. But otherwise, people are making the rounds on social media who this could be, who the shooter could be. Of course, it was with Frank Turek, and it was Charlie Kirk's bodyguard. And then now it's Mikey McCoy, but amongst others in the crowd. So let's continue on here. We'll comment as we go. But again, let's really just think through what they're about to say, because it's very important when it comes to the security team and the way that they need to conduct this in the case of this event happening, and it did happen.
They are attacking him, claiming, based on a few seconds of clips, that he allegedly has like a nonchalant or calm reaction to Charlie's murder. And I'm just going to be blunt about this. This is a extremely disgusting attack. And I can speak to that because I was there when it happened and I was next to Mikey when it happened. And what I can say is, I can't say every single thing that happened, but I want to talk about this specific narrow thing, that the shooting occurs. I am next to Mikey. Both of us hear a loud crack. We both turn. We both see Charlie, who has been shot. Both of us, I think at about the same time, realize that means there is a shooter who is on the scene. And, you just hear the crack, so you don't know, did it come from far away? Did it come from close? Is there a mass shooter unfolding right now? So I and him both had the reaction of, let's get out of here before we are both shot. That is not us abandoning Charlie. Charlie had a security team. They all leapt immediately into action, and they got Charlie out of there, which was what their job was to do. My job was not to get in the way and screw this up because, I had to be a hero. That was not my job. I remember even running past, both of us going past the SUV that we came in on, and me thinking, should I get in that car? And then thinking, no, that's a really stupid thing to do. And then I kept going. So I was not with Mikey, or I don't remember being with him. I think I was ahead of him as we left. And then we get out, and I run for can't have been more than 15 or 20 seconds. And then I realized there hasn't been another shot, so the shooter has likely been detained or stopped or something, not in immediate danger. I pause, I look around me, and I see Mikey. And I see Mikey there. And truthfully, I will never forget what I saw, because I've seen Mikey almost every day for the past 2 years. I know his personality very well. He's a very bubbly guy. He's a very happy guy almost all of the time. And I'll never forget what I saw, because it was clear in the moment that he was profoundly freaked out. What I'll always remember is the way his lip was quivering, which I'd never seen before. And you very rarely see from someone that he was freaking out. And then I think he literally said to me, I might be imagining this, but I think what he literally said was, he was looking around, and then he says, I need to call Erica. And then he takes his phone and he begins calling Erica. And I don't want to disclose how that call unfolded, but he did that. Your mind extends all of this, but that is happening within a minute of all of this occurring. I remember he calls Erica. Around the same time, I pull out my phone and I call my mom just to say, Mom, there's been a shooting. You're going to see it on the news. I'm okay. Pray for me. I've got to go. And I remember that call. And around the time I put that phone away, and then he immediately calls his dad. He calls Rob McCoy, and he says, Dad, someone shot Charlie. You need to call all of your pastor friends. Charlie was hit. We need everyone to pray right now. And that's what he told him. And I guess it's very disgusting for me as someone who witnessed this, who saw Mikey hugely distressed and then step up in the moment, because after that call was over, I saw Mikey get total mastery of himself, that he realized he had to step up in this situation. And from that point, he was like a general directing a battle, where he was, grabbing people and saying, okay, we need to get to the hospital, and we need to do these things, and you guys need to wait here. I need to get in here to get information so that I can get it to Erica.
Now, what's interesting about all of this, and I'm not trying to dive too deep into this because there's not really much to it, but otherwise, this is for somebody as detail oriented as Charlie Kirk would have had a contingency plan when this comes down, when this would happen, when this instance would happen. He knew that there was a huge or a high possibility of him getting attacked in some way. It's happened before, in the sense of maybe verbal attacks, but also physical attacks when it comes to knocking his hat off or throwing stuff at him or spitting at him. He knows that because of what he says is not a very popular opinion, or whatever the case is. We know how people can be violent when they disagree with somebody's point of views when it comes to things about politics or things about God. I've most certainly seen some of that in this chat, and I do appreciate those who are not tolerant of the violence that happens in this chat, even those those of you that disagree with me. So I appreciate that. But otherwise, I almost could have gotten a job at Turning Point long ago as somebody who would be the videographer, possibly filming video events for filming for his events. The application that I submitted and the interviews that I had were moving through the sort of ranks. Eventually, I could have gotten a job. However, things changed dramatically for me to eventually work at my one of my churches that I used to attend. However, I have met Charlie Kirk personally. Very kind, very wonderful man, very gentle in spirit. And he was doing his show at my pastor's studio. And so talking to him for, really with the smallest interaction, this had a huge and profound impact on me. Now, I'm bringing that up because for for these people, Blake, that you're seeing on the screen now, Mikey McCoy, and many others, I've actually seen Mikey McCoy. I think I've spoken to him more than I did even with Charlie Kirk when he visited. I've spoken to Charlie Kirk's security guard. That he was actually just somewhat freshly hired. He was kind of new to the team because they had just fired the last security guard, if I'm not mistaken, during that time. And or at least it would have been within the most recent couple of years. So, however, I do remember seeing Mikey McCoy. I do remember seeing the bodyguard and talking to these two. And otherwise, I can only imagine having been worked side by side, having worked side by side with Charlie Kirk for, a number of years. And he's your boss, and he's somebody you're really close with, like such as Mikey McCoy was, or he was with him, every day, according to Turning Point staff, almost every day, if not every day. And these men, they spoke with each other quite often. So I can only imagine that feeling the need to want to step in and help, because this is somebody who's become your friend, even more so your family. You'd have to really fight that urge back. But they were trained enough to hold themselves back and allow the security team, the security detail, to do what they needed to do to conduct the best possible actions necessary. And the only one not a part of that security detail would have been Frank Turek. So his decision to get in the vehicle, as he's explained before, as we've gone over this podcast before, his decision to get in the vehicle must have been some type of discernment to do that very action. Now we're going to continue on with this video to get the rest of the story, but let's hear what Blake is going on to say.
And
Well,
when we learned he was dead, he came out and he told us, and then he says, now none of you can say anything that you've heard, because Erica is not going to hear about this from anyone except me.
Can I ask a question? I've just been thrown into this 10 minutes ago, but there's a suggestion online that Mikey, Charlie's chief of staff, one of the most sincere people you'd ever meet, brilliant, Christian, kind, everyone he ever met in his entire life, couldn't hurt a fly, was part of a conspiracy to murder Charlie. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
It's vile. It's utterly vile.
Who would do this? What type of individual? Just to create content, do we think, or is there what's the ulterior?
I don't know. I think a lot of this mindset just sort of fuels itself. It's sort of addictive in the same way a lot of social media stuff is addictive, or in the way honestly something like pornography is addictive or something. Like they get really they almost get a high off of like the idea of like that they're doing something that's daring or out there.
Yeah, and I want to make one other point though, and this is actually to your point. You saw Mikey do heroic things that day. I saw Mikey do heroic things. I was not on site, but I immediately flew to Utah. We got a plane. It's not something that I'm used to, but it was like my wife went with me. We went straight over. I knew I needed to be with Erica and the team immediately just because, I just knew. But that moment when I got the news, I was so shell-shocked. I was not even there, but I was immediately traumatized. My brain fries like an egg. I can't see straight. I can't think straight. All I knew is that, like, what's happening? My wife came in. She, like, hugged me. We started crying together. And I can't even remember those moments very clearly. I wasn't even there. Mikey was two
Mikey's
steps
talked
away.
about that.
And I asked him, I was like, do you even remember the moments after? He's like, I can't even really remember. I know I called Erica. I know I called my wife. I know I called my dad. I can't even really remember the steps I took. But here's the last thing I want to make a point of. And Charlie had given me similar instructions along the years. Said, if anything ever happens to me, you call Erica.
Yeah,
that's
the other
thing. And he drilled that into Mikey's brain so that when this moment of trauma happened, that he turned around and he knew he had to do it. And by the way, last thing, because this is part of the video allegations here, is that they think they're alleging that he was on the phone immediately. He was not. He was taking social videos, which he would send to our group chat, which we would then put on Charlie's social while the event was happening, so you could see like the crowd come in or his interactions. And we were only 2 questions into this event, so he was still getting it out to all the chats he needed to do, which he did at every event. He turns around, and it was so blaringly loud, I'm told. You would know this better than I, but this is what I'm told. It was so blaringly loud, and he was so shell-shocked, he put his fingers in his ear, but his phone was still in his hand. He walks away, and he's
And not even walk. I want to, because people are talking about that. The way it was is we had a cordoned off area with grates, so you had controlled access. All the people, when this happens, they all get the idea we should leave before we are shot, and so there's a little narrow gap that I think people. It's not really walking; it's that everyone has to slow up to get through this little narrow choke point to get out of the area. And
anyways, well, the point is he walks briskly. I don't even care if he's walking, running, whatever, because again, the most traumatic thing you could imagine had just happened to him. My brain fried. I cannot imagine what was going through your guys' head being on the scene and seeing it and knowing, again, the security guys are jumping in. He turns and like I'm telling you, Mikey that day turned into a general on a field, marshaling the troops going. But like for a second there, obviously he didn't know what to do. And then he clicked into gear eventually. It was amazing.
Mikey was a heroic figure on that day.
Again, seeing the videos online, if you've seen them, you know that this would have been absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. Seeing this before your eyes, because those videos were graphic, very graphic. And it's unfortunate that they had to witness this themselves. And so this is what we see. This is what's happening. So Candace, of course, talks about this moment. Now, what you see on screen is, of course, this video that Candace plays. This is moments before Charlie Kirk is shot. And the person that is circled there, you can barely see what's actually, who this actually is. But according to Turning Point and according to the staff that you just heard, that this is actually indeed Mikey McCoy. Now, from other angles, you can see that he puts up his phone or puts up his hands to his ears as they explain. And this is the sort of clip that she shows of when Charlie falls down. Mikey McCoy, you can see him turning around, walking away, and you can see in the back, it takes a couple of seconds. You can see eventually he walks back out. And then she plays another clip of Mikey McCoy just standing there next to the vehicle. What would have been probably the moment that Blake might have seen Mikey McCoy shell shock. Who knows? I don't even think that even a lot of this, because of such a traumatic event happened, that they can't even remember the details as clearly as the videos are portraying it to be. By the time that they're gauging in their mind as to what happened and how fast they acted, everybody's going to criticize that because it's all on public display for everybody to see. Now, of course, Candace here, she right away at the first moment of her podcast, the start of her podcast, this was aired roughly 8 hours ago. And immediately she says, "Do you buy that?" Let's hear what she has to say.
All right, you guys. So here's what's going on today. Turning Point USA has issued a statement, a couple of statements, actually. For one, they say the reason that Mikey McCoy walked away so swiftly after Charlie got shot is because Charlie himself told Mikey to do that. Charlie somehow drilled into Mikey McCoy's mind exactly what he should do in that circumstance. Are you buying that? Any buyers of that? I'd like to know, because if there are, I'd like to inform you. Didn't want to say it this way, but I am in fact a Nigerian princess. I am stranded currently on an island. I'm going to need you to send your credit card details right now so I can return home. And if you do, I will transfer you $1 million when I get back to my kingdom. Frank Turek is also being added into the mix. He is telling me, plus other conspiracy theorists, to shut up unless we have the facts. Okay, Frank, challenge accepted. Let's learn some more facts today.
So this is Candace. As she goes on continuing with what she wants to present to her audience, because there's so much video footage out there, there's so many theories, you can literally take any one of these theories and go miles with it until eventually you come to a stop, because now you're just attempting to create some type of story when it comes to what happened. All we know is that there was one bullet that fired. Now, where that came from, I don't know. Here's my own sort of theory. And I don't want this to really even go anywhere. I hope it doesn't go anywhere. Because it's not even a well thought out theory. I thought about this for like a brief moment. And I'm like, how would I even prove this? You would have to understand, or you would have to get multiple witnesses to be able to confirm this. But of course, with the different people that have spoken online that were at the event, couldn't tell, some could tell, some couldn't tell where the shot was rang out. When you look at the video from way back, the initial first video that was way, way, way at the top, you hear the shot ring out and it sounds like it's from a far distance. But then you get to one of the videos where they're right up close next to Charlie, or I wouldn't say next to Charlie, but close to the mic. The shot sounds to come from right close, like close near that area, that vicinity. It sounds like somebody's shooting from within that crowd. I thought, I don't know. That's weird. I looked at, I think, 3 different videos. In each of the different videos, then it's sort of just, you can only go so far. I'm like, I'll leave that be, because you just don't know. You just don't know. And now Candace is saying, well, what Turning Point is saying is, do you believe that? Do you buy that? It's honestly frustrating because of course, I think me and many others want to know what happened to Charlie Kirk. We want to know the entire truth, and we want to trust the government for the federal investigators and whoever's on the investigation. We want to believe that all this is done and spoken in truth. Me, most certainly, I have been heavily impacted by this because this was somebody that I listened to on a daily basis. I understood, his sort of, I wouldn't say his mindset, but I understood sort of where he stood on issues when it comes to the things that he talked about, the many debates that I've listened to from his college campuses to Oxford to you name it. Now, I want to know something here. I'm going to end this poll here. This is the poll that we conducted earlier about the no media coverage on the Charlie Kirk case. 74% of you disagree. But 26% of you agreed that there should be no media coverage. My new poll is something that I want you guys to think about. Do you guys think Candace Owens is onto something? I want to know you guys' thoughts. Now, of course, for those that want to chat with me, email me at freedom@equallyyoked.show.com, equallyyoked.show.com, freedom@equallyyoked.show.com. Subscribe to the podcast. We are changing things up here because we have so much information to present you today, and it's to read the chat and to stop, which of course I appreciate you guys for chatting. However, I do want to make it very clear that if there's anybody that wants to clearly debate me on something or clearly ask me a specific question, please email me, freedom@equallyyoked.show.com. At the end of the live show, we will most certainly be I'll be looking at your comments as much as I can to go back and see what you guys are saying and talking about. Now, overwhelmingly, so far, 17 votes in, we have 76% of you saying yes, Candace Owens is onto something. So I want you guys, as this poll continues, please continue to vote on that. Otherwise, we have so much stuff to cover still, and we're just scratching the surface. So with what's happening around the world, Charlie Kirk stood for very American value, centered value, things. When it comes to what Trump is doing, when it comes to where he's at, we're going to go over a poll about Trump's popularity. But in this most recent trip on the USS George Washington, he is thanking his new ally, Japan, the Prime Minister of Japan. And this goes along with the message that Charlie was talking about constantly, which was peace through strength. This is how America is going to have strength and bring back its ability to be the world's superpower. As we went over in the last podcast, speaking of the World Economic Forum saying that the US will no longer be a superpower. However, it's going to be distributed amongst a couple of nations that will have or hold the status of superpower. Now, I have a sort of biblical perspective on that when it comes to the book of Revelation, when it comes to the book of Daniel. We're not going to go into that in this podcast, however, I just did want to mention that. So let's take you over to Trump mentioning Japan. And we're going to try to get there and hopefully gives you a better perspective as to what is happening globally. And then we'll get into the poll, the new poll from that is posted by an article in Reuters. So here we go.
We'd be the victor that would leave because we had people that didn't know what the hell they were doing. But we're also very honored to be joined by hundreds of our incredible Japanese partners, and they are incredible. Thank you very much. This woman, that's right. This woman is a winner. So, we've become very close friends all of a sudden because their stock market today and our stock market today hit an all-time high. That means we're doing something right. But the cherished alliance between the United States and Japan is one of the most remarkable relationships in the entire world. Really, there's never been anything like it. Born out of the ashes of a terrible war, our bond has grown over 8 decades into the beautiful friendship that we have. It's a foundation of peace and security in the Pacific. You see it? So on behalf of all American sailors stationed in this beautiful country, let's hear it for our allies and the Japanese self-defense forces and all of the Japanese people that we love and respect. And I have such respect for Japan and the country. And now I have a really great respect for the new and incredible Prime Minister. And I have to say this, the first female Prime Minister in the history of Japan. Madam Prime Minister.
Now, I do want to mention that it's interesting because, and I'll go to one of the questions that we got on the email us at freedom@equallyokedshow.com. YouTube Punk, I'll get to your comment in a moment, but this is interesting because we have what is happening here on the USS George Washington. And of course, we have what he's saying is that stocks went up in the US and stocks went up in Japan. And there was a video that circulated, well, actually wasn't really public. This was posted by the Charlie Kirk show with, of course, following the aftermath of his assassination, talking about how they have, footage for up to 10 years. And one of the clips that they showed was one from his recent trip to, I want to say, South Korea or maybe just in that area. I think even Japan. I could be wrong. But he did speak in Japan to some type of conference. And in this speech, he was talking about the language, the culture. And when the prime minister, when she got elected, she spoke about immigration and essentially resetting it to zero, to rethink the whole immigration idea, saying that we don't have anything in common with those who are immigrating. So it's also interesting. But YouTube Punk, you say you can limit the chat interaction, but taking it out completely makes the show just a monologue. Now, yes, I am somewhat, I'm not taking it out completely. However, I'm getting an idea when I do peek at the chat. I'm still looking at your chats. And if there is something that is absolutely a must to speak about, I will address it. However, I'm getting an idea as to what you guys are saying generally. But you say, do you think Tyler Robinson is guilty? And to please include a third option for the polls. Well, what this third option could be, I guess I'm open to your thoughts. But do I think Tyler Robinson is guilty? Well, we have no evidence yet. The only evidence that we really somewhat have is what the FBI has put out based on the chats from Discord and the video footage, which, I mean, is not necessarily clear. Now, are we going to get some other additional angles to him leading up to the rooftop, him pulling out a weapon? Hopefully, because people have gone around the campus and have shown the many different angles of the CCTV or where the CCTV cameras are positioned. Now, I must say, having some kind of knowledge of CCTV cameras, used to work in retail, and essentially what we would have to do if somebody committed a theft in our store, what we would do is we would go and review the footage, but the CCTV cameras had to be monitored, or rather, they had to be, what's the word for it? Serviced every now and again, because they had to make sure that the time lined up with the current time that it is. And so in some cases, you could be hours off. In some cases, you could be minutes off. So the whole CCTV camera footage conspiracy theory as to what went down, when it actually happened, when the shot fired out, and when the camera is recording, the camera, CCTV cameras are known to go out of sync quite often. And for those that may have a better understanding in the chat, please let me know what you guys are thinking concerning this. Email us at freedom@equallyokedshow.com. I want to know if anybody has any sort of experience concerning this. But from my own personal experience, even an instance with where we live, we had some kind of car jacking, and we tried to reach out to the management, and basically what happened from their end was, well, our CCTV system was, it went out of sync when the power outage happened. And from this point on, we don't really know where that, the time frame that you gave us, we didn't see anything on the cameras. So they couldn't find out what happened. No evidence of anything. I'll leave that be. But otherwise, we have Trump also talking about a merit-based military. And this is important. Because when we have a military that is practicing policies, the likes of which DEI policies, affirmative action, we don't have strong leadership when it comes to the military. Now, I'm gonna play also after this Pete Hegseth talking about how they're changing the policies within the military. all the branches. This is why he gathered all these generals to this one place to speak about the changes that are coming. So this is Trump talking, getting to the point of speaking about merit-based military. We'll get to that clip in a moment. So let's bring you over and show you what exactly he's talking about.
Equipment that rides along in those ships, you see that nobody makes equipment like we do. Nobody makes the ammunition, the weapons, the missiles, the planes, none of it. And if they do, the American sailor stands ready to crush them and sink them and wreck them and blast them into oblivion, right? We have to. That's a terrible statement for me to make. That's the end of it, because everybody said that I should immediately get the Nobel Peace Award. With that statement, that takes me out of the running, but that's the way it is. The United States is blessed with the strongest and most powerful military in the history of the world. There's no military like our military, not even close. Nobody has our weapons, and it'll be stronger and more powerful than ever before very soon. You know, we just approved the biggest budget in the history, over $1 trillion. Over $1 trillion. We have the best ships, the best airplanes, the best submarines, the best technology. But above all, we have America's military. It's the best people. It's all about the people, ultimately. You have to work all of that fancy stuff that we make better than anybody else. The fact is, we do make the best weapons, but if you don't have the right people to operate those weapons, they don't mean much. Despite that, as Commander-in-Chief, I never forget that our ultimate strength does not come from equipment. It comes from the men and women of the rank and file. That's true. It comes from you people, incredible people, good-looking people, too many good-looking people. I don't like good-looking people. I never liked good-looking people, I'll be honest with you. I've never admitted that before. But see, I'm allowed to, you know, we won in the Supreme Court a thing based on merit. You know about that, right? Merit. Everything now in our country is based on merit, and that's why I look at you and I see nothing but merit. It's great to have a country back where we can go by merit now. We don't go by anything else except for talent and work and hard work, and it's such a big win. That was one of the most important wins, and the will, patriotism, and spirit in your hearts is our single greatest weapon. The strength that you have is unbelievable. That's why as we make a record investment in our military, we've never spent so much, and we've never spent it more wisely, because now we watch it. We spend it properly.
Now, I think the reports are that the military has spent, or the new budget for the military is about $1 trillion. I could be wrong, or an additional $1 trillion, whatever that looks like. Feel free to let me know in the chat. But otherwise, there is this talk about merit-based hiring, merit-based practices. And of course, this is important when it comes to even with hiring in general, whether it's in the military, whether it's in your everyday 9-to-5 job. This should be, when people hire you, it should be based on merit, not your background, not your race, and none of the likes. And so this is, of course, Hegseth addressing top generals. This was on September 30th. And as we hear what he has to say based on merit, we have, as he talks about, no more DEI. We'll actually, let's hear what he has to say.
And I commend you. You are truly the best of America. But this does not mean, and this goes for all of us, that our path to this auditorium on this day was a straight line, or that the conditions of the formations we lead are where we want them to be. You love your country, and we love this uniform, which is why we must do better. We just have to be honest. We have to say with our mouths what we see with our eyes, to just tell it like it is in plain English, to point out the obvious things right in front of us. That's what leaders must do. We cannot go another day without directly addressing the plank in our own eye.
Now, mind you, for those that do know this sort of reference here. He is referencing somewhat Matthew or even in Luke when it talks about judging one another. That if we judge, we're judged with the same measure of judgment. But Matthew 7:3-5 says, "Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye?" And some translations say plank. "But do not notice the log that is in your own eye. Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." So this is the scripture that he's referencing, but otherwise, let's hear what else he has to say.
Without addressing the problems in our own commands and in our own formations. This administration has done a great deal from day one to remove the social justice, politically correct, and toxic ideological garbage that had infected our department, to rip out the politics. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit. I've made it my mission to uproot the obvious distractions that made us less capable and less lethal. That said, the War Department requires the next step. Underneath the woke garbage is a deeper problem, and a more important problem that we are fixing and fixing fast. Common sense is back at the White House.
Now, as you heard him say, no more dudes in dresses. No more DEI days or whatever it was. We have to realize that this will make our military stronger. When we're focused on one clear thing, and that is the threat domestically or the threat internationally. To protect and defend our borders, to protect and defend our freedoms, these men and women, these top generals and those that you saw during Trump's address on the USS George Washington, they're fighting for the very freedoms that we have to be able to discuss on this podcast, to be able to share our thoughts. Now, I'm going to end the poll, the last poll, with Candace Owens being onto something. Astounding amount of you, out of 65 votes, 69% of you say yes, and 31% of you say no. She's not onto something. So it seems like we've got a sort of high amount of viewership here that thinks that Candace is definitely onto something. I'd say otherwise. I'd say that she doesn't really have anything. She's latching on to these different theories, and it almost seems like a new theory each video, each live video that she does, and she gets hundreds of thousands of views on these live shows. She gets a lot of people. So her influence and her reach, considering that she does know Charlie Kirk, apparently according to the text that she's releasing, according to the videos and the photos, she would know that Charlie would prepare his staff for something like this. She does know the dangers when it comes to speaking out on matters that are not very popular. But despite Trump's accomplishments, despite what we're seeing, Trump's popularity dips as Americans sweat cost of living. Reuters poll finds. So Donald Trump's presidential approval rating fell in recent days, tying to lowest levels of his term. The 3-day poll, which concluded on Sunday, showed 40% of Americans approve of the Republicans' leader's job performance, compared to 42% in October 15th through the 20th. Americans give Trump exceptionally low marks on how he has managed the cost weighing on U.S. households, with 63% of the country disapproving of his handling of the cost of living, up from 58% earlier this month, and more than twice the share of who think he has done a good job on costs. The share of people who say they disapprove of his performance, has grown from 52% in May to 57%, the latest survey. But of course, 73% of Americans polled want the insurance subsidies to continue despite arguments that they will increase the federal budget deficit. Little changed from the result of a poll conducted earlier in the month. Now, I want to conduct our own poll. Now, what the third option could be, I don't really know, but I'll insert one. And we can figure out what this chat thinks. Do you approve President Trump's leadership over America? Now, it's a very basic poll. We can't do multiple polls here. However, hopefully this helps us gauge as to what is going on. Now, remind you, we are less than a year from Trump being in office. We still haven't reached that year mark. Now, we still have a couple of more years to go. And ultimately, what comes out of the next 3 years? Does he eventually instill himself as king, as many have said that he is shooting for? But otherwise, I want to know your thoughts about today's show so far. How can I improve this program? But this show has been growing incredibly. So thank you. Subscribe to the podcast. Email me at freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. I want to know your guys' thoughts even after the show. I want you to weigh in on what we're covering here. We still have quite a few things to go over, and I think we're going to save that in for another podcast. And as this poll runs, to give you a preview as what's coming on the next couple of podcasts, on the next couple of shows, we've got Gavin Newsom. We have, of course, Prop 50 coming up in just a couple of days. We have all the conversation surrounding Mamdani, socialism, if people will leave New York or if people are going to stay, according to Andrew Schultz. But a sort of majority of people are saying that there is a possibility of people who aren't really public, who haven't said publicly that they're leaving, rather, they may consider leaving. But we're just beginning to figure all this out as to if he's going to win, which I think most likely he's going to win. I think he's going to take the cake, honestly. Mamdani is doing very well with his campaign. The videos that he's posting, the way that he's representing himself. Now, many people said, according to the last debate that he had, the last mayoral debate, that he got crushed. And looking, of course, at the rally that they had, Freeze the Rent, or New York is not for sale. A lot of wild things said there. But just to say about this is that the new sort of faces of the Democratic Party, which I think is tanking because of, I don't know, how things are going, the sort of popularity. Now, to remind you, those that obviously Trump is in office because people voted him in. He won the popular vote, but he only did so because they made it too big to rig. And of course, this was something that I was planning to cover today, but I think we need to reel it in just to kind of gather our thoughts of everything that we showed today, because there's still so much to talk about. Now, remember that we have a poll going on. Do you approve of President Trump's leadership over America? Conduct your votes so that I can get a better understanding as to the chat and what you guys are thinking. Now, another email comes in from YouTube Punk. He's so far taking advantage of emailing. And I want you guys to also email me, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. Let me hear your thoughts. And he emails so far, what do you think of Charlie Kirk's un-Christ-like behavior after Paul Pelosi was attacked and nearly killed by a MAGA Q-bro looking for Nancy Pelosi? Charlie Kirk was gleeful and said someone should bail him out. Your thoughts on this awful behavior? Now, I don't have any videos to present to you concerning this. If we want to discuss this at another show, we most certainly can. We can bring out the evidence of him being gleeful, his comments that he would have mentioned on his podcast. And we'll look at the context of it. We'll see exactly what he said and how he said it and the information surrounding that. And we'll share our opinions then. But at the moment, I can't comment on it because I don't have any of that evidence in front of me. I believe you have mentioned that in this chat before, but haven't looked into it just yet. But so far, the polls that what we've been discussing was Trump's popularity dipping. And our own poll, so far, we have 34 votes, and 56% of you say that that you approve of his leadership over America. 41% of you say no. 3% of you say, I don't really care. And I understand. Maybe you're not too much into politics. You kind of happen to stumble across this show and, whatever reason, your algorithm fed you my live show. And I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm glad that you're here. And hopefully you continue to come back so we can get you to a level-headed, mindset about all this stuff. Now, I have my perspective and you have your perspective, and hopefully I can get your guys' understanding about where you guys are coming from, as YouTube Punk has been pointing out on some of the comments. I do want to grow this show, and I do want to be able to figure out a nice, steady rhythm as to interacting with the chat. And this is coming to a point where we will start interacting, or I will start interacting with you. And earlier, one of the comments, I think it was YouTube Punk, because you've been here from almost the very beginning. And I'm grateful for you, bro. I'll say that much. However, you asked about my wife being in the chat because she's the only one so far moderating the chat as of right now. I can't figure out who I'm going to place on the chat or how to even go about this. But otherwise, I think I just have to let loose and choose a couple of you. But she is doing some homeschooling stuff for the kids. She's preparing. It's 1 a.m. and she's not asleep. She's working hard. She's awake. She's listening. My kids are sleeping. She's working hard. She's preparing all the homeschool stuff that she's going to have to do tomorrow morning. And she's got a lot of stuff going on. She's got a lot of stuff to prepare. She's got, I think, over 50 something the things that she's preparing for. She's setting herself up for success, to say the least. but she's doing so much to teach our kids, and she's really taking it all to heart because it's what she loves to do. So I'm just about to end this poll at this moment. 36 votes. I want you guys to get in your votes. Please get in your votes. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are when it comes to President Trump's leadership. Now, mind you, one of the comments from Melissa said that he's only 9 months in. Yes, we still have quite a ways to go. Kalunka, you say, why homeschooling? Well, this is the reason why we want to do homeschooling is because what we've seen during the last 4 years, this is prior to my son starting homeschool. The last 4 years, we had wild stuff happening within the schools. A lot of crazy news stories regarding Palestine, regarding the Christian faith, regarding the teachers and the students, kids. But ultimately, we want to focus on homeschooling. At least my wife also, and my wife and I have come to this agreement of, well, we're going to homeschool our son, our children, for at least the first couple of years, maybe up until high school. I don't know yet. We don't know yet. We haven't fully discussed this, but this is something we sort of are agreeing upon right now so that we can get him a solid foundation so that we can prepare him for what the school has most certainly been teaching. The woke schools have been teaching the last couple of years. Of course, things when it comes to these secret closets and not telling parents, not being very transparent about what's happening with your kid in school. These gender ideologies and these nasty school books making their ways into the library system. Very graphic books. So we want to be able to give them a solid foundation because we want to instill him and prepare him for the world that we live in. And most certainly, my son, he's very smart. His artistic ability, his math skills. I mean, gosh, I think this kid is going to be smarter than I am. Far surpass me. He's a young kid. Well, Jim Bellina, I don't want to mention the graphic nature of some of these books. You can find somebody by the name of John Armwinchukwu. It's a interesting spelling. I believe it's a African last name, African American last name, or no, not African American. Is that what is his background? I forget. But I think he comes from a part in Africa. I can't remember, but John Armwinchukwu, I understand we're all adults here, but YouTube doesn't take this language lightly. And so the possible takedown of this video, dealing with all that stuff, it's not fun. So I just have to be careful. But these books that have been shared online as to what is actually in them, the contents, the very sexual nature of them, very bad. Very, very bad. Easy to look up and to find out these books. What's her name? Joy Reid. Joy Reid had on a guest. It was a mother. She heads an organization, and Joy Reid is clearly defending these graphic books, and the mother has some very good sense in her to, again, go against the lies that Joy Reid is saying. I think you can easily look that up and find that interview, but it's wild. And no, I'm not referring to books for young adults. I mean, young adults, what are we talking here? Over 18, obviously they wouldn't be in high school or younger than that, but we've seen books from kindergarten books. California has these books. California Library, Steve Hilton has talked about these books. Very bad. Scrap Iron, you say if your kid grows up to be gay, you blame the schools, right? Never your community. Or is anyone to blame? Well, the contention of a kid growing up to be gay, maybe you mean if he said he was always born, or if he was always gay, or he always felt this way towards boys or whatever. You have to take into account many different factors. What he's listening to. If he's going to school for 8 hours a day, he's going to be conditioned by what the teachers want to condition him with. We've seen what happened in California. If you live in California, you know what has happened in California. When it comes to schools and what they've done. Now, this is way off topic from what we were talking about, so this is not something that I can necessarily bring up to you as far as what schools or what we can do the research right now, but I do want to see if I can find something for you, Jimbalina, of some school book titles. I'll see if I can find some for you while we chat in the comments. But, of course, who my son or who my daughter is hearing from, they're going to have it's going to be such a huge impact on their lives, because they're constantly hearing these teachers, or they would be constantly hearing these teachers and repeating the same stuff, whatever their agenda is, anti-God or even for God. Who knows? Anti-American values versus pro-American values. We don't want our children growing up hating the country in which we live. And at some point, they're going to have to go on their own to research and understand and to find out the facts, to find out the history. We saw many historical or moments of history being erased during the Biden administration, especially during George Floyd. But if a child comes out as gay, it's a very spiritually involved conversation, very spiritually involved warfare going in the mind, because, of course, according to our beliefs, according to what Scripture says, and my perspective, I believe that God's word is infallible, but many of you have disagreed with me on this point. That God has set up man to be together with a woman. As God forms Eve from Adam, God says that the two will cleave to each other, they'll become one flesh, and that they'll leave their mother, their father and their mother, to cleave to each other. Jesus saying from the very beginning, have you not read from the very beginning that God made them male and female, and the two shall become one flesh, so on and so forth. This of course, was with a debate from the Pharisees talking about marriage, talking about divorce, rather. Now, I'm looking for these books that you were asking about. Now, obviously, this is going to be the more sort of relaxed part of the podcast because of doing the research and all this stuff behind the scenes. But otherwise, I'm going to end this poll as of right now before we continue on, because I know there's a lot of questions coming in on the chat, a lot of comments going in. But otherwise, it says, do you approve of President Trump's leadership in America? We're going to end the poll at 48% say yes, and 49% say yes, 49% no. It's a split, almost a split tie. We have the sort of I don't really care 2% with a total of 47 votes. And I should have maybe let it go on for about a minute longer before I completely ended it, because it seemed like people were getting their votes in at the last moment. However, let's see. I do want to go back up here so that I can address some comments here. Yeah, because I stuck on that one point for maybe a little too long, but they say teachers who work in secular schools have to make an effort to protect students by sometimes ignoring parts of the curriculum. But also the problem is that these teachers aren't notifying the parents that they're going to be going over some of this curriculum. That would be considered. That would be considered graphic for your child. And no, gay can't be contagious. There's something psychological that I don't think anybody has a full grasp as to the male on male attraction or the female on female attraction. I don't think anybody has that full understanding. We can theorize, we can hypothesize. I am going over a book called Correct but Not Politically Correct by Frank Turk. Views that would be considered highly controversial. Maybe we'll talk about this on this talk about that on this podcast at some point. But it says there are instructions in the Bible about how to abort the fetus. Again, we'd have to go. I've had this conversation way back when this podcast first started, when we went over the context. If I'm not mistaken, this was a long time ago. We'd understand that the Bible was giving directions for specific reasons. But these are just points that people like to bring out to have a, gotcha statement. But when you find out the context as to what God is speaking of here, you then begin to understand why this is even in the Bible. Teachers Union also pressures teachers to vote certain ways. Just FYI, y'all. That's Jolly Feats. Thank you. I'd like to see the books and not just leave some outraged PTA mom spitting into the mic. Yeah. Again, that's going to take me a moment, but I'm behind. I'm way behind on comments. So let me see if I can find these. There's a video here. Let me see. Let me pin this in the chat. And if you guys want, you guys can look at it. There. Okay, I'm going to go back on the chat a little bit. Okay, so let's see here if I can. Let me get out of this. Let's see. Okay, that is not helpful. Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna do this here. Okay, as we get some of that research done, let's see here. Somebody said here, Carlos, you say you are free to believe in God if you want, but you don't have the right to force your sky wizard into law. That's the crazy part. But yet we have people saying stuff like this, and then they're forcing LGBTQ conversations and lessons and things in the school. Again, we go to a level of Overton window acceptance, and now acknowledgement, acceptance, and then we continue on till eventually we are forced to say pronouns. We're forced to. I mean, social medias have this, of course. And you say, scrap iron, sounds like you would disown your child if he was gay, most likely. What say you? No, I would not disown my child. I would continue to tell him and show him that I love him. However, I would not, what's the word? Approve of the lifestyle. I tell him plainly as that. So long as he or she is living under my home, they will not be allowed to practice that in the home. Just as much as you guys have the very right to do the same with your children. Then I'm sure there's probably something that you yourself wouldn't allow in your own home. But just because it's a controversial topic, all of a sudden it becomes wrong. But there's of course, what YouTube Punk is saying. It's who they are, not a lifestyle. We can agree to disagree. It's a choice. You can choose whether or not you want to get into that lifestyle. It's absolutely a choice. We all have a choice, whether we get into a heterosexual relationship or a homosexual relationship. It really is up to the person. Now, I have met some Christians that have a strong conviction of the scriptures where they will not participate in or act on their impulses or attractions because of their conviction to scripture. One man telling me that he considers himself celibate. But my wife says this, and I agree with her. Absolutely. People can do whatever they want in the bedroom, but it's about wanting us to practice their beliefs. They don't want to practice ours, but if we disagree, then they have a problem. It's absolutely right. I do want to bring out the book for a moment because given the topic of the conversation, because the debates about same-sex marriage is really not about these things. And I agree with what Frank Turk is saying. It's not about equality or equal rights. It's not about discrimination against a class of people. It's not about denying homosexuals the ability to commit to one another. It's not about love or private relationships. It's not about tolerance or intolerance. It's not about bigotry or homophobia. It's not about sexual orientation or being born a certain way. And of course, just to reiterate, this is from the book Correct, Not Politically Correct, about same-sex marriage and transgenderism by Frank Turk. It's not about race or the civil rights struggle. It's not about the interracial marriage. It's not about heterosexuals and divorce. It's not about the separation of church and state. It's not even about religion. And the comment is, but that's all I hear about. You say, of course, that's because the propaganda campaign continues to be successful. Those topics are all smokescreens designed to divert you. And he says, in fact, for homosexuals, this debate isn't even about marriage. As data from countries with same-sex marriage shows, approximately 96% of homosexuals don't get married when they are given the opportunity, and those who do get married break up at a much higher rate than heterosexuals. And he cites the findings here on the bottom of the book. In the Netherlands, which has had same-sex marriage since 2001, only between 2 and 6% of homosexuals have married. Such low numbers are consistent in other areas as well. It says we'll use the average of 4% or 96% who have not married. The rate is highest at 16.7% in the early days of same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. It says, but that number, which is still low, is probably reflecting the same pent-up demand found in the Netherlands, where the number of same-sex marriages has declined every year since 2001. Then he says, see Maggie Gallagher and Joshua Baker, Demand for Same-Sex Marriage, Evidence from the United States, Canada, and Europe. Institute for Marriage and Public Policy, April 26, 2006. Posted online at www.marriagedebate.com. But the divorce rate for homosexual men in Norway and Sweden is 50% higher than heterosexual marriage. And the lesbian divorce rate is more than 150% higher. Then he says, see Gunnar Anderson, the demographics of same-sex marriage in Norway and Sweden, demography 43, 2006. So, interesting. But here are some of the books that Pastor John K. Armanchukwu. And by the way, thank you for the super chat. Satisfied Videos. Pride is one of the deadly 7 sins. You're right. Isaiah and Ezekiel talk about the fall of Satan. It talks about it's really about pride. Even the scriptures talking about before the fall comes pride, or pride comes before the fall. This is a very dangerous thing. We become prideful. We begin to elevate ourselves above God and His Word. We begin to call ourselves God in our own mind, how we want to rule, how we want our life to be. But the debate that, before I get to the books, the debate that is being proposed here by Frank Turk is, since most homosexuals don't want to get married or stay married, then why are homosexual activists so adamant about government recognition of same-sex marriage? Because same-sex marriage will win them what they really want: validation and normalization. In other words, the activists want same-sex marriage because they understand that government-backed same-sex marriage will validate and normalize homosexuality throughout society. The key point here is government-backed. homosexuals can already, quote unquote, marry one another privately. There's just no government provision for it. Nothing is stopping homosexuals from pledging themselves to one another in private. And it says same-sex marriage ceremonies. In fact, it's done all the time. There is an entire cottage industry for gay weddings, but that's not enough for homosexual activists. What they want is government endorsement for their relationships. They know that such endorsements will make homosexuality and their behavior appear just as normal as heterosexuality. That's why the same-sex marriage movement has more to do with respect than rights. Greg Koukl puts this very well, saying, quote, same-sex marriage is not about civil rights, it's about validation and social respect. It's a radical attempt at civil engineering using government muscle to strong-arm the people into accommodating a lifestyle many find offensive, contrary to nature, socially destructive, and morally repugnant. End quote. That is from Correct, Not Politically Correct, from Frank Turek, but the books that are mentioned here of a pornographic nature, described as pornographic, sexually explicit at school board meetings and in media, some titles as It's Perfectly Normal by Robbie H. Harris. Armanchukwu confronted the Asheville City Schools Board and called the puberty sexual health title pornographic. Push by Sapphire. At a Broward County School Board meeting, he read explicit passages from Push and labeled them and labeled the material pornographic. Flamer. He has publicly criticized Flamer, a graphic novel, and said passages were pornographic when confronting school officials. Media reports covered his removal and being booted while reading from it. But he's also been reported reading or criticizing various other titles at local school board meetings and rallies, and broadly described many LGBTQ themed and puberty sexual health books as sexually explicit, pornographic, or groomer material. Most of the books of the group targets have LGBTQ themes through several of which contain no reference to sexual conduct. In this context, the terms pedophilic or groomer are anti-LGBTQ dog whistles. Now, this is from lailluminator.com. This is, I believe, their take on it. Let me see here. It says the term groomer usually refers to behaviors sexually predators use to coerce potential victims. Some conservative activists have used this term to suggest LGBTQ plus people are using books to groom children into becoming LGBTQ, something that there is no evidence to support. Now, of course, we've seen the drags in libraries. We've seen that. I mean, this was super big in the Biden era administration. It was all over the place. Pink Floyd said it best, leave those kids alone. It's not about the books making these kids gay. We're on this subject. We just I think maybe gone on about this. In the comments, Juiced, Clary, say books can absolutely influence sexual behavior. You're right. Stole the words out of my mouth. It's not about the books making them gay, but it's about getting their minds to think about sexuality at such a young age is ridiculous. At a certain point, that conversation begins to come up more and more. And at some point, of course, it's human nature to wonder about these things, where babies come from, and the likes of which, reproduction, human reproduction, and all that stuff. So it's not about the books making them gay or whatever, but of course influencing. Child's mind, for those that don't have children, they don't understand how much a child's mind absorbs when learning from parents and people around them. They literally absorb your reactions, they absorb your way of speaking, they absorb everything. My wife also said this to mention to YouTube Punk that they also vote to take our rights away too. So it goes both ways. Bibles are not even allowed in schools, yet we have sexually explicit content in our schools. Now, some schools have made the choice to bring back the Ten Commandments, which I think is an excellent thing. But even as somebody said, yes, Call the Wild changed my life now. I live in the woods in Arkansas. You know, books, even if they're not sexually explicit, can indeed influence our minds. When we have things, of course, like Frank Turk, which people don't like in this chat, namely YouTube Punk, the liar, the Christian apologist, because anybody who he disagrees with is just a liar, immediately a liar, even though he has credentials to back up his claims, because according to him, you have to have credentials in order to say anything worth anything. It puts the weight behind you. Credentials can help you in arguments, sure. In debates, sure. People that are subject matters on topics such as the Christian faith or the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament. But me as a Christian, and by the way, I'm not bearing false witness because you've said that many times in this chat, but me being a Christian, talking about all this stuff because it's triggering a lot in the comments that I'm maybe homophobic. Maybe that's the vibe that you're getting. I hope you're not getting that vibe because I have nothing against the people themselves. Of course, I disagree with the lifestyle. I can tell them about Christ. I can say, look, the scriptures say this about homosexuality. However, I'm still called to love on this person, even though I don't agree with their sin, or even though I don't agree with their lifestyle. Doesn't make me any more perfect, doesn't make me any more holy, doesn't make me any more righteous than them. Even though they wouldn't be considered righteous if they're not following scriptures. I'm also a sinner. And I'll be the first to tell you. The Bible tells us that our righteousness is as filthy, dirty rags. It's clear. There's not one righteous. Not one. Easy. Romans. This is one of the many that scripture talks about. Let's go from the beginning of Romans 1. We'll start here in, I don't know, we'll start in 16. Paul says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes." Here we go. Let me bring in the scripture for you so you can also see it. So you don't think I'm just gaslighting you or trying to make you believe in something that is not really there. "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile," or the Greek, rather, it says here. It says, "For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." As Frank Turk put it, contrary to nature, or the person that he quoted, Greg Koukl, one of the two. It says, "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men, or mortal man, and birds and animals and creeping things, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen." It says, "For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passions for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error." And somebody says, well, screw the translations. The translation of Romans is debatable, so just use the Greek. Okay, well, first of all, I can't read Greek, but we have a wonderful software here that you're seeing that can actually show the Greek. And it can interpret it and help you to understand. So if I go over here to, I don't know, desires maybe, or we'll go to passions, show more information. It says, translates Parthian, and refers to Christ's suffering and death. This use of the term is still current elsewhere in this as the same word. It says desire, longing. Okay, here's the Greek.
Orexis.
That's how you would say it. Orexis. Tells you the root of the specific words. So passions for one another, referring to homosexuality or unbeliever generic person. The cultural ontology or the preaching theme. Another, you look at that, the basic word says not the same, different as, or different as we have one form of government, France, another, one more in addition to a former. It goes on to what another means. And we click on that word. This is the
Allilon.
Allilon. That's the Greek word there. It's from the Greek's Strong's. You can also see the different times that the word is used throughout Scripture to see the sort of how, I don't know, how that single word is used throughout Scripture. Somebody said, someone told me the translations were debatable in this chat, so I mentioned we have the Greek. Got it. See, that's the problem with reading sometimes the chat. I begin to think somebody's trying to oppose me on something when really they're opposing somebody else. So then it looks like they're opposing me. So I'm addressing the comments. So for you, Juiced Clary, if you think that I was attacking you, or no, it's not even an attack, debating you, I appreciate you for the clarity. Jim Bellino, you say it has been translated so many times that we've already gone through this translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. It's not even the translation of a translation. It's the fact that we have modern day translations that go back to the source text, the Hebrew, the Aramaic, or the Greek, for them to be able to figure out exactly what the language is saying, to bring it into modern day languages. So it's not that we're getting lost in this in translations and telephone game. But otherwise, you're asking, now you're spreading hate. You're saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm crashing out. Somebody said there is no judgment or hate. This is rebuke. I'm simply pointing out to you where the scripture talks about this, because you asked me specifically, where does it say this? Somebody asks also, are you against homosexuality? I'm against the lifestyle, but that does not mean that I hate the person. We can have our differing opinions in this chat, and this is what ultimately is the basis of this channel, to be able to freely speak, to be able to talk about all this stuff. YouTube Punk says, which rights have Christians been deprived of by gay or trans people? Be specific. We're talking about people that have, specifically with relating to my wife's comment saying that they have the rights to also vote these things away, whether it be atheists, whether it be gays. People have constantly gone against Christianity, gone against biblical principles. This is a fact. Even you're doing it right now with asking me to be specific about any of this stuff. Even those that are, of course, denying or rather going against me in the chat, saying that I'm hate-filled. You're not a Christian or whatever. When Christ hung out with sinners, he loved them, but didn't love their sin. He always pointed them back to God. Of course, himself being God showed them the example of prayer, showed them the example of seeking the Father, but through him, that they would only be able to go through him because of what he says, that he is the only way, the truth, and the life. But you say Frank Turek has an MPA and MDiv, says you need to be more critical of his flawed thinking instead of just accepting everything he says. Look, this goes back to you. You bring me his credentials. You bring me his... You say that you need to be more critical of his flawed thinking. But you've often said in this chat, when I bring up Mike Winger, that he has no, you say he has no credentials, so how is he able to speak about anything concerning the Bible? I'm paraphrasing your words here. I'm going to be honest, I'm paraphrasing your words, but I can go back and I can look exactly at your chats, considering what you've said about Mike Winger. But when you disagree with anything or anybody that I've said, you've always said, oh, LOL Breitbart, or LOL Mike Winger, or LOL Frank Turek. Because all these guys, you've constantly disagreed with everything that they've said, because it's antithetical, opposing, it's opposing your views. I mean, clearly what I read to you from Frank Turek's book was he was citing the reasons as to why this is not, the debate is not about the various different points that I mentioned. And this is what ultimately, again, you're saying not everything, they lie a lot. So you're just blanket stating everything. They lie a lot. They lie. They're liars. They're liars. They're liars. Bad Christians. You've called me a liar many times. Somebody said, whether you want God or not, God created the universe. You will stand before God one day to be held accountable. Yeah, absolutely. We all will. The believer and the unbeliever. To the believer, to everlasting in the presence of God. To the unbeliever, cast away into everlasting destruction. As he puts it in the book of Revelation, into the lake of fire. God has to deal with all the sin at some point. He dealt with it at the cross, yes, where we are redeemed at the cross. I'm saying he now has to judge the sin. Because he's the judge of the universe. He's the judge of all the living and of all the dead. But God, as the scripture says, God is not the God. God is not God of the dead. See, and now we're shifting to Charlie Kirk had zero examples of the black pilot becoming a black pilot after failing his exam. The standards were not lowered. So now we're getting down to the I need specifics when we've already gone over what the airline CEO said. We've already gone over that, and you have asked me for receipts. We've already gone over it. We've already gone over some of their video on the Thought Crime podcast that they did concerning that comment. Merit is not based on race or based on color. It's based on if they can do the job, to simply put it. And also, when we're talking about minorities and people of color, what does that mean? It means everybody that's not white. People can be dark-skinned and be considered black just by generalization of their skin color. Jim Bellina, you say, for some people, this rhetoric turns into violence. But why does it? Because somebody disagrees, why does it turn into violence? It only proves the point that those who oppose anything, especially of God, or politically, whether we have right or left, it shows the violence of the person within their very actions of how they react to something. We have, in the case of Tyler Robinson, saying some hate just has, there's no negotiation for some hate, according to the text that he sent his lover, his boyfriend who was transitioning. You just can't negotiate with this. Huh? Why? Why can't you talk about this? Why can't you just say, okay, well, clearly this is something that I don't agree with. I don't have to keep listening to this guy. But I've said many times, and I'll say it again, it's not about hating the person. It's about the lifestyle that is opposed to my religious views. We live in America. We have the right to talk about religion. We have the right to talk about speech. We have the right to have this freedom of speech. We have the right to agree to disagree. And if you don't like it, you also have the right to walk away. I'm here bringing out the points of the scriptures, not a conservative talking point, not a right-wing talking point or whatever. The scriptures talk about the destruction of this kind of lifestyle. We saw the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. We saw the destruction of what Romans is talking about. what Jesus talks about concerning God making them male and female. I'm just pointing out to you what Scripture says, and this is what I believe as well. It's not about hate. It's not about that I show somebody who's gay or homosexual any different. It's not about giving them, me personally, giving them any bad looks because they have their own lifestyle. It's just that. They have the ability to live the way they want to live privately and publicly. And it's up to me as the father of my kids and my wife to be able to be prepared when our kids have conversations, because this is, according to God, just it's not natural. It's unnatural according to what he has deemed natural. Again, YouTube Punk, about answering your questions specifically. I already answered your question. It's a generalized statement as to whether gays or trans or anybody that has voted my rights away, it's about anybody. It's not even about gays or trans or anything of that nature. It's about the fact that anybody who opposes things such as the Bible, such as marriages between one man and one woman. Obviously, when you have issues like that publicly, who are mostly against it? And who will be more willing to vote against it? Such as when Trump made the executive order to make that, to change that, to change the language or whatever it was, that a marriage between man and woman. I forget exactly. I think we covered it on this podcast before. But who do you think is going to be most likely to oppose that? Straight people? I don't think they're going to care. You're saying that I said my rights are in danger. No, I'm saying they could and would be more willing to vote away things that are antithetical according to how their lifestyle is. So if the scriptures talk about straight lifestyle or heterosexual lifestyle, of course, they would be more willing to ban them out of schools, or willing to participate in getting them out of the schools, or pushing the schools to get rid of them, teachers. Like, to bring up all these receipts and to bring up exact specifics It's not even that I'm allergic to specifics. It's about this is going to go on for years and years and years of or even a couple weeks of research, rather than just trying to give it to you here on a podcast on a moment's notice. And so now I'm the bad one because I'm not providing any receipts. I'm not giving specifics. When you know very well that this is a podcast, that we don't do anything here on the show, and being prepared to justify my answers, sure. Remind you, I'm a one-man show. I don't have a team of people preparing me for these types of questions, or a team of people, going through all these specifics as to demographics. I just read to you a book that had details as to what it goes. Now, I haven't even read the whole thing. Now, this book might even contain your question. It's possible, because this is a book that has thorough research as to data and specifics. Some of the contents: the law is a great teacher and it encourages or discourages behavior. Government-backed same-sex marriage would encourage and normalize homosexual behavior, and it would harm natural marriage, children, adults, and homosexuals themselves. The law should promote behaviors that are beneficial and prohibit, or at least not endorse, those that are destructive. Therefore, the law should promote natural marriage, and it should provide no option for government-backed same-sex marriages or marriage or unions. Or even, we want equal rights. Homosexuality is like race. Homosexuals were born that way. Weren't you born heterosexual? It's probably in this book. There's even more table of contents that would literally bring about the Supreme Court decision. Love didn't win, children lost. The short case against same-sex marriage. The 4 P's and 2 Q's. Sex at work. Sex is a new religion. Again, Frank's got all this stuff already researched. So it's more about bringing to you, because you're all about facts. And even if I bring facts, what happens? You then shift the goalpost. Well, this, and that. A, B, C, and D. You say, are you afraid that you're going to catch the gay or something? What a loaded question. If you have been hearing me the last 10 minutes ranting about this, because this has now suddenly become the podcast of, I don't know. But you'll say that there's plenty of hate in Frank Turk because you just don't agree with him. And even if the points that he brings up, even of the facts and the data, you'll say, well, he still got hate. Oh, well. Yes, you say you hate that I make statements and can't support them, yet you're on the other side of the screen doing some AI research and pulling up quick articles, headline articles to get me on something. When you know very well this involves thorough research on everything, which I don't have the time to do, first of all. I have kids. More importantly, I have a wife, the job, a lot of things to manage here. This is not my job. This is not my full-time job, although you guys see me here from 11 o'clock to 2 a.m. talking to you guys, and the 2 to 3 hour time span that I have to prepare any of this for you guys. Each day, at least preparing stuff for you. Somebody said all the receipts can be found in the Bible. Yeah, you're right. And really, you have to just, if you want to know what God thinks, God is the ultimate authority. He really is. He's got all the answers in the scriptures, all of them. Jolly Feats, these Reddit trolls are just trying to get engagement so they can go back to their Reddit caves and earn their another fedora. And the rights that you have here were given to you by God, not man. Read it again, my friend. You got to come up with a smarter question than that, YouTube punk. Smarter question than that. Senor Spicy Boy, you say you're another political influencer. You're a dime a dozen. What purpose does this show even serve? So if everything is part of God's plan, why fight so much? Well, God, part of God's plan, what are you talking about specifically when you say part of God's plan? God's ultimate plan is for the redemption to come back to the Israelite people, the Jewish people. People disagree with that these Jews that are in the land today are not the same Jews in the Old Testament. But the reality is that these are still the same Jews. They are still the ones that are promised this land. And when God said in Ezekiel and in many other books talking about the regathering of his people back into the land, that he says, you will be my people again and I'll be your God again. Over and over throughout the scriptures, he talks about the cursings upon the people of Israel. If they fall into idolatry, if they do not follow the commands of God, God then curses them. God has very strict rules for the Israelite people because they are to be the light to the nations, the priests and the kings, the example to the rest of the nations. Ultimately, to bring the nations to God. But what does God talk about? What does he talk about in the scripture? He talks about the ones that are grafted in. That the Jews were blinded by part, but the ones that will be grafted in at some point. Read in, I want to say Micah, or even Malachi. It's not that Christians are replacing the Jews, it's that we're grafted into God's family and that God will ultimately fulfill his scripture concerning the Jewish people. Read Zechariah 12. When they look upon him whom they pierced, and they will ask him, actually, when they look upon him, it says that they're going to see his pierced hands and his side and his feet. And they're going to say to Jesus, because this is Jesus, this is not how we can get around the fact that this is not Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth is wild. But you really have to manipulate and twist scriptures to say that this has nothing to do with Jesus. And by the way, Michelle, you say, if you're just logging on, he talks about everything and he's just answering questions right now. Yeah, so for those that are just joining in, I know it's the viewership most certainly has gone down a bit because it's already 2 a.m. California time. And for you guys, it might be any other time of the day, who knows? But right now I'm just going through the comments and I'm addressing specifically about God's word and his prophetic statements concerning Jesus returning to the Jewish people. Now, if they're not the original Jews back in that day, and these are not the Jews, then who is Jesus returning to? God literally says in Ezekiel that he's going to gather them from the nations of which they were scattered. So they go on, they live their lives, even as Jeremiah talks about that, to seek the welfare in the nation in which I've sent you, because in its welfare you will find your welfare. That when they go into exile from their land because they did not follow the commands of God, as God said, if you have denied, or if you have broken my commands, then this will happen to you. Python, you say in Leviticus 19:33 through 34, it remarks that we should treat foreigners as we do our native born, yet they do not receive due process and have been treated with much contempt. What are your thoughts? Yes, but Scripture also talks about this. This is very limited Scripture that you mention here in the 200 characters that you have. When we have to go through a whole context as to the Israelites coming from being slaves in Egypt to coming out of slavery, only knowing knowing this lifestyle for 400 plus years. Mind you, now you have to undo this slavery mindset from the Israelites. God told Abraham about the fact that the Israelites would go into slavery for 400 plus years. God told Abraham beforehand. They went into slavery. Moses brought them out of slavery. And God reminds the Israelite people throughout Scripture saying that I'm the God that brought you out of Egypt. Clearly, it is a very important stamp on that is upon the Israelite heart, that they wanted to return back to slavery because it was better for them in slavery, that they were well fed. Mind you, that they were saying they were better off in slavery when God was providing them freedom. Okay. Now we got to take all the context into we have to take all the text into context. And being that the Israelites came out of slavery, God had to set provisions over them because of their destructive nature, because of what they went through, because of humanity's destructive nature, and because of the having to undo the mindset of the Israelites. God knows that they're human. God knows that they're going to be limited in understanding. And now God has to make provisions for them so that they can eventually become free of slavery. But even in those days, slavery was used as a tool to get out of debt. And some slaves were even told to even given the ability to stay as slaves. So this idea of the modern slavery understanding that we have, which if you're widely mistaken of America, promoting slavery. America was the first to abolish slavery. We have Leviticus, that we have a whole context again to go through. And even the rights that are given to slaves in the scriptures. Modern day slavery, we know that the slaves did not have rights. But God gave any slaves that were either purchased or acquired or however, that they could and they have rights. So again, it's just a whole context that we need to go through. Far too much we'd have to go through Leviticus, which probably turn all of you off because honestly, at this point, you're going to be like, well, now we're going to have to go through the reading of all this scripture and blah, 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 blah. But we have some passages here that I'll read just by typing in the keyword slaves. If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made. They shall not be put to death because she was not free. But if a priest buys a slave as his property for money, the slave may eat of it, and anyone born in his house may eat of his food. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you for yourself and for your male and female slaves, and for your hired worker and the sojourner who lives with you. These are all scriptures that are just out of context because I'm just reading to you when it comes to the individual scripture or the individual word search. But the word here, slave, is also as bondmaid or bondman or bondservant. Other words, maid or handmaid. Slave, slavery, person owned as a property by another, and the relationship that bound the owner and the slave. Slavery was widespread in the ancient Near East, although the economy was not dependent upon it. By Roman times, slavery was so extensive that in the early Christian period, one out of every two people was a slave. From at least 3000 BC, captives in war were the primary source of slaves. Genesis 14:21, Numbers 31 through 31:9, Deuteronomy 20:14, Judges 5:30, 1 Samuel 4:9, 2 Kings 5:2, 2 Chronicles 2:8. Slaves would not be purchased locally from other owners or from foreign traveling merchants who sold slaves along with cloth, bronzeware, and other goods. Joseph was sold by Midianites and Ishmaelites to an Egyptian. That's Genesis 37:36, 39:1. It says, in this manner, debt was the basic cause for many families being reduced to slavery. An entire family could be subject to slavery. 2 Kings 4:1, Nehemiah 5:5-8. The law code of Hammurabi stipulated a maximum of 3 years of slavery for the family. It says, as opposed to a maximum of 6 years under Hebrew law. That's Deuteronomy 15:18. Voluntary slavery was widespread as a means of escape from subject poverty and starvation. That's Leviticus 25:47 and 48. Selling a kidnapped person into slavery, the crime of Joseph's brothers, was a capital offense. That's Genesis 37:27, 28. I can continue to bring these scriptures up, and literally, it's just going to be ignored by those who oppose this view. So there we have it. You say, why this ancient slavery talk? Because somebody asked about it. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it be. I think we've gone enough. It's like atheists can't handle doing research and study. Anyway, all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing, and hopefully I can see you guys on the next show. We've got a lot to cover, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So again, thanks for watching the Equally Yoked Show. Subscribe to the podcast. Email us, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. Give us your final thoughts, and God bless.